Good evening, dear learners. This is your educator Rashi Poddar for UGC NET Paper 2 English. Our today's session is on metaphysical poets, an important group of 17th century poets which has been asked in multiple times in NET. Before starting, let us understand what does the word metaphysical mean. Meta means something beyond. We have meta version of several applications in our phone today. So meta means something beyond, unimaginable, and physical means world, living. So these poets, metaphysical poets, were writing in a style which was beyond something else. It was like breaking the norms, breaking the tradition. So these poets did exactly the same. Now, one important point is that when these poets were writing, they didn't knew that they are metaphysical poets. They were just a group of people who were writing. For the metaphysical term was used for the very first time by John Dryden for John Donne. John Donne is the most important, we can call him the father of metaphysical poets, father of metaphysical poetry writing style. He was the most important writer among the metaphysical poets. So, John Dryden used the term metaphysical for John Donne's writing style. But to group these poets, to put all these poets in a single group, was Samuel Johnson. So Samuel Johnson, in his famous work, Biography of the Lives of Eminent Writers, he, in the biography of Abraham Cowley, he grouped these poets like John Donne, Richard Crashaw, Abraham Cowley, and many more into a single group known as the metaphysical poets. But the term poetry was first used by John Dryden for John Donne. Now, who were metaphysical poets? They were a group of 17th century English poets, and they were basically famous for their intellectual complexity, how they used to express a simple idea using complex examples, inventive metaphors. They use metaphors not which were very creative. Like, we have an example of John Donne's poetry in which he compares lovers with compass. So now you might be wondering, how can we compare lovers with compass? These two are two different things. That is what the metaphysical poets did. And they used to write on philosophical themes. Their poetry basically explored topics like love, religion, death, and the nature of the soul, often combining emotion with logic. So they used to combine emotions, like love is an emotion, right? Love is an emotion. In the same way, your devotion towards God, that is also an emotion. So इस तरह के themes को वो किसी logic के साथ combine करते थे in a very surprising way, and readers get awestruck how such comparison can exist. That is why they were very separate from the other styles of writing. इनकी writing style इसीलिए separate थी, but the main thing is that these poets were not very famous when they were writing. At the time when they were writing, they were not very famous. It is the modern poets like T.S. Eliot who accepted their writing pattern, who praised their writing pattern. Writers like John Dryden, Samuel Johnson, they praised their writing style. They said that they are in true sense creating a poetry. Now, what does the word metaphysical mean? We have already seen that metaphysical means something beyond, dealing with something abstract philosophical idea. And the term was first critically used by Samuel Johnson. So, Samuel Johnson was someone who grouped these writers. But the term metaphysical by John Dryden. Now, Samuel Johnson saw that these poets are overly learned because, how overly learned? Because to be the metaphysical poet, you need to have knowledge of everything. That is the only way you can compare things. Philosophy, you need to be very philosophical in your life, and their comparisons were very far-fetched. Basically, किसी भी normal इंसान को भी आप दोगे, someone knowledgeable also, that person will also not be able to develop the connection that these poets were able to. So, at the time when they were writing, they were not very famous, but later scholars praised their innovation. And you need to remember the point in which essay Dr. Johnson used the term metaphysical poets and grouped all these poets into a single group. It was Lives of the Poets, which is a work of Dr. Samuel Johnson, and it consists of 52 biographies. And the first biography is of Abraham Cowley. Abraham Cowley is also a metaphysical poet, and इन्हीं के बायोग्राफी में सैम्यूल जॉनसन ने सारे राइटर्स को एक स्पेसिफिक टर्म मेटाफिजिकल पोएट के ग्रुप में ज्वाइन किया था. What he said about the metaphysical poetry, he said about the metaphysical poets, he said about the beginning of the 17th century appeared a race of writers that may be termed the metaphysical poets. The metaphysical poets were men of learning, and to show their learning was their whole endeavor, but unluckily resolving to show it in rhyme instead of writing poetry. They only wrote verses, and very often such verses as stood the trial of the finger better than of the era, for the modulation was so imperfect that they were only found to be verses by counting the syllables. So यहाँ पे बेसिकली इन्होंने आपको एक बेसिक आइडिया प्रोवाइड कर दिया है कि कब ये इमर्ज हुए, इनका राइटिंग स्टाइल क्या था, किस तरह के थे ये लोग. एवरी पॉइंट इज मेंशन इन दिस पर्टिकुलर डिस्क्रिप्शन गिवन बाय डॉक्टर सैमुअल जॉनसन. Now, what was the key characteristics of metaphysical poetry? How they were different from the traditional poets? They used conceits. What is conceit? Conceit is something extended, bizarre metaphors that draws unlikely comparison, like lovers as two legs of compass. So metaphysical conceits का ये लोग use करते थे. This is the most important point. Conceit is extended, bizarre metaphors. Okay. Then they use wit and paradox, clever comparisons, but intellectual play with the language and ideas. ये लोग paradox is something that only. तो ये intellectually language के साथ play करते थे, ideas के साथ. Philosophical inquiry. They used to drop deep questions about God, love, soul, time, death. Thus, they used to deal philosophical topics in their poetry. Colloquial language. That is, they used to write in conversational tone, plain speech mixed with scholarly reference, but they used conceit. They used typical complex metaphors. They used philosophical ideas, which made their poem quite tough to read, but it was in a conversational tone. Once you get the idea, the basic idea, you will love the poetry. So these are the key characteristics. Apart from these, we have like abrupt opening. A poem often begins in the middle of a thought or with a dramatic direct address. Like you won't find a narrative continuation there. The poem might begin in the middle of a thought, like you were sitting and thinking about something, then you suddenly thought of writing and you started writing from the middle. Blend of emotion and reason. You will see that emotion is being justified with a reason. Passion is tempered with analysis and argumentation. So these were the key characteristics which you need to remember. Apart from that, let us see who were the important writers in the group. Multiple times NET have asked questions based on their characteristics and the writers were John Donne, Robert Herrick, Thomas Carew, Richard Crashaw, Henry Vaughan, George Herbert, Abraham Cowley, and Andrew Marvell. You need to cover these writers on your personal level, like you need to see the writing style of John Donne. You need to read the poems of John Donne, Robert Herrick, Thomas Carlyle. If you see any poem regarding these poets, you need to read that poem. Let us see the writers in detail. John Donne, he was born in 1572. He was the leading figure of the metaphysical poets, and he used to write on themes like erotic love, spiritual struggle, death, divine union. Thus, he has written a sequence of sonnets called Holy Sonnets, in which he has dealt with the themes of spiritual struggle, divine union, etc. Some of his famous poems that you need to read as well are The Flea. And in this poem, flea is a mosquito, and he says that the flea bite is compared with physical intimacy. He says to the lover that this flea is biting me and this flea is biting you. That means that he's sucking my blood and he's sucking your blood, and this is how we are getting physically intimated. So there is no need for us to get in real physical intimated because the flea is doing that work for us. So it is a very bizarre comparison. You are comparing a physical intimacy, which is an emotion, to the bite of a flea. So it is the metaphysical poetry writing style. Next is a valediction forbidding mourning. And in this particular poem, he compares love as a compass, in which he says that it doesn't matter how far the one point of compass goes. It will move around the whole world and come back at the same position, and this one, the fixed position of the compass, will always be waiting for that person to come back, and that will be the holding point, the fixed point. सो यहाँ पे ये डायरेक्टली कंपेयर करते हैं, जब ये अपने एक बहुत ही लंबे ट्रिप पे जा रहे होते हैं तो ये अपनी लवर को यही कह के, अपनी वाइफ को यही कह के जा रहे होते हैं दैट यू नीड टू बी लॉयल एंड आई एम like that moving portion of the compass. No matter where I go, I'll always come back. So it is a bizarre comparison again, obviously. Next is Death Be Not Proud. That is the Holy Sonnet number 10, and it challenges death. The next is Sun Rising. You need to read these poems that are mentioned here. Now, in Sun Rising, he goes into a direct conversation with the sun, and he says that go away from our window. Don't disturb us. Don't disturb lovers like us. We are deeply mad into each other. I don't want to see your face in the morning, but I want to see my lover's face, and that is enough. Don't disturb us. We are happy with us only. So such bizarre comparison he used to do. The next important poem is The Good Morrow. The next important poem is Holy Sonnet number 14. That is Batter My Heart, 3% God. And in this poem, you will see the biblical reference as well. The next writer that we have is George Herbert, and he was born on 1593, and he used to write on deeply religious themes because he himself was a very deeply religious poet devoted to Christian themes. He used to write in simple language, but his language has extended metaphors, thus creating profound meanings. Some of his famous works are The Caller, Easter Wings, and Love 3, that is a dialogue between the soul and God. So George Herbert के poems को it is not necessary for you to read the poem, but you need to remember the name and the publication date of the poems published by George Herbert. Next in we have Andrew Marvell, 1621, and he combines love and political themes, and he is known for his wit and elegance. How he shows the bizarre ideas with elegance. The most famous poem of his is To His Coy Mistress. And the famous line is, had we but world enough and time. You need to read this poem, To His Coy Mistress. The next in The Garden, that is about the philosophical solitude. And last is An Horatian Ode, which he wrote on Oliver Cromwell's return. So you need to read the poem To His Coy Mistress. Next is Henry Vaughan. He was born in 1621 and he influenced George Herbert, writes about nature, eternity and the soul, and some of his famous poems are The Retreat, They Are All Gone into the World of Light, Christ's Nativity, and They Are All Gone into the, okay, this is the repeated one. So you need to read these two poems, The Retreat and the Christ Nativity. Next in we have Richard Crashaw. He was born on 1613. He was a Catholic poet and he used to write in intense religious devotional themes with sensual imagery. Some of his famous works are The Flaming Heart and Hymn to the Saint Teresa. Now you are not supposed to read the works of Richard Crashaw, but you are supposed to read the works of John Donne. John Donne के आपके सारे poems covered होने चाहिए. What are the themes that metaphysical poetry deals with? Metaphysical poets used to write about love, death and immortality, God and faith, time and transscience, the human body and the soul, and science and the universe. We have an example here how the metaphysical conceit is used in metaphysical poetry. For example, in John Donne, A Valediction Forbidding Mourning, he compares lovers to two legs of a compass. We have already seen how. There is a famous quotation, if they be two, they are two so, as if twin compasses are two. So he uses the extended metaphor and unites geometry with emotional fidelity, that is love. So we have already seen that these poets were not praised at that time, but once they were once criticized as obscure, like no one was able to understand, so they used to disregard them, but they were now praised in modern age for their innovation, originality and intellectual daring. And it was T.S. Eliot, modern poets like T.S. Eliot, who admired Donne's ability to unify thought and feeling, that you are basically combining logic with emotion, thought and feeling. So, metaphysical poets got famous around modern era. I hope that you have noted all the important points regarding metaphysical poetry. You have understood what is metaphysical poetry and how metaphysical poetry is created, who are the important metaphysical poets and how they implied conceits to create metaphysical poetry. That's all for today. Have a lovely day.